Hello there, bookworms. Another book review from me, and I'm gonna review a book called The Diceman by Luke Rhinehart. The Diceman. This is a book that was it says by Luke Rhinehart, but actually it's written by a guy called Robert Cockcroft, I think it is. I've written his name down. George Cockcroft. But Luke Reinhardt is the actual name of the protagonist, the main character in the novel. So what basically happens is the story of the novel is you have this psychiatrist who is doing very well. It's a novel, by the way. It's a fictional novel. He's a psychiatrist doing very well. He has two kids, nice wife. He has a career that is going quite well, but he's a bit bored with it, and he has a best friend or a friend who's doing better than him. He's getting more acclaim, and he feels a little he basically feels jealous of that, upset, and at one point I think he's going through a kind of midlife crisis and thinks, what's the point of this all? And he does contemplate suicide at one point. Then what happens is he has this idea of literally living his life according to the roll of a dice. So what he does is he writes down these various options, and he says, right, he's just going to roll a dice and let the dice decide. He said that's what he's going to do. So he does this, and the first thing that he decides, one of the things he's going to do is go downstairs and rape his neighbor, okay, who just happens to be this best friend's wife. So he rolls the dice, and of course it comes up on the number that he put down. He has various options, and he puts, and one of them is that comes up, obviously, and so he goes downstairs, and he goes down and knocks on the door of this neighbor and says, hello there, or whatever her name is. I think her name is Lillian or something, or Lil. And says, hi, I'm here to rape you. So it sounds a lot worse than it actually is written about in the book, because really what it is she knows him, she's kind of been flirting with him, and she basically engages on a kind of affair with him, and it's a bit silly that the way that starts. In fact, I think the idea is to have some kind of shock tactic. And remember, this book was written in 1971. I think it was printed in 1971. Although it says he's going to go down and rape this woman, it looks more like he's just going down, and it's almost like a bit of a carry-on film. Hello there, I'm here to rape you. Oh yes, come in and have a cup of tea. Oh, that was very nice. And it's a bit like that. But I think the idea is that this is a device that's been used to, sort of show that he's, really transgressing a boundary. And so the rest of the book is about how this guy, Luke Reinhardt, who is a fictional character but is credited as being the author of this book. So this book is almost written like as if it's a journal, but really, but it's not. He basically he starts making other decisions based on the roll of the dice, and eventually gets to the point where you can see where this is going. He puts down six options, rolls the dice, and he has to. He says has some options that he likes and other options that he doesn't like, but he lets the dice decide, and it gets to the point where it's it starts off kind of fairly innocent, like, although not the first one, but like walking to work or running to work, or going backwards to work, and then it starts turning into other things. So he's a psychiatrist, so he starts dealing with his patients in different ways. So he says he's going to engage in sexual acts with his patients, or he's going to suddenly act like Jesus and be like a messiah, or sometimes it'll say that he won't say anything at all, or he'll answer a question with a question, and it's all on the, so it's all like that. It gets to the point where he starts to develop a kind of he gets even gets his kids involved in it. So at one point, I mean, I won't give too much of the plot away, but the kid, right, rolls the dice and decides whether they're gonna do their homework, or whether they're gonna be the parent one day, or whether they're gonna just do whatever they like. So it gets like that. Then his wife gets involved, and eventually, what happens is this cult develops around him. So he starts. This takes off so that there are dice therapy centers where people go in and basically, on the roll of a dice, start doing whatever they want. So that's kind of like the story of the book. So I won't give too much away about the book itself. It's fairly long, although I noticed a lot of people sort of that had read it did complain about that. I didn't think it was that long. It's actually quite funny in bits. So remember, this is written in 1971, so this is at a time when being gay, the idea of gay was actually still it meant being happy. So he does do things where he, on the roll of a dice, he starts experimenting with all sorts of things. And I suppose in 1971 that was probably really shocking, because it does say on it, you know, the Diceman is a cult bestseller and a way of life. This book can change your life if you dare to try it. So I think it probably did seem very subversive in 1971 to a lot of people. It was apparently banned in a few countries, which I didn't know. I didn't think it was that shocking, but anyway, apparently even the length of the book was decided by the roll of a dice, and the way that the book is written, there's chapters that literally are 2 lines, and then he's got poems in it, and he's got all sorts of different things. So I get the feeling that while this book was written, the person did actually use the dice and do that. And I suspect that even the name Luke Rhinehart was probably the result of a decision of the dice. So as a book itself, what can I say? So there's a few things about it that I noticed. One of the things was that, I mean, it's funny. The book is actually funny at some parts, and it does make you laugh. It certainly does make you think, because at the end of the day, who lives a life in the structures of life and society, who hasn't ever thought, what if I could just give up all those structures and just live my life the way I want? Although remember that he doesn't actually live life the way he wants. He lives life according to the rule, the way that the dice kind of commands him. So the dice literally becomes his god. The dice becomes God. You could say chance becomes God. I suppose there's other characters that this is probably not the first time that this kind of idea has been played about with. If you watch Batman, there's this character called Two-Face who tosses a coin, and according to what the coin says, that's what he does. So okay, this guy's got 6 options. He's got a dice, so it's a different. But it seems to be playing into the same kind of idea. I mean, there's a lot of sex scenes in this that he describes, which actually sounded quite kind of cringy, and I wonder whether, again, was that put in because it's 1971 and they thought it's going to sell more books? Was that the idea, or was it literally put on did this guy actually just use a dice and say, right, I'm going to put in all these scenes? I'm not sure. That's kind of interesting. But that kind of, I thought it was unnecessary to have all those kind of things. What was interesting for me was the idea of the self, of breaking the self down. And I think this is the idea that this is the main sort of, I think that the philosophical idea of this book is really that, you know, we all have a self, we all have an identity that we've constructed, and what if we were just breaking that down and, and we could just do other things. And so I suppose he's got a kind of mechanism to try and do that. Um, but you know, obviously, you can imagine it as a book like this, where he goes with this. You can imagine if that's what you do, and you start putting down all sorts of options. Although that you can imagine where it might go, and you know, some of that does happen in the book. Some of it's quite funny, the way he does it, but some of it you just think, I mean, for example, how do you get away from the idea, you know, of the options? Because at the end of the day, you've got to put the options in, and that's what you've got to put down. So they're your options. So it hasn't, that random element isn't actually there. So that's the thing. Did I actually enjoy the book as a book? It was all right. It was okay. Like I said, some of it was funny. I did sort of want to get on with it and just finish the book at one point, but it was interesting to see where it developed. There is this was written in 1971, and this particular author did do something called the EST training, and some of you on this site may be familiar with that. It was one of the forerunners of the Landmark Forum, and is one of those early kind of personal development type trainings. And I think there is a connection with this, with the author and that. So whether, I think it was like Fight Club. He went on one of these personal development courses and then afterwards wrote the book. And I think he wrote this book after that. So whether it was the inspiration or whether it was a parody of Est, I'm not 100% sure. I think it probably maybe a bit of both. So there is that kind of connection. But yeah, it's an interesting book. Is it worth reading? I think it is probably worth reading, and even if it makes you think that, you know, perhaps our selves are constructed, they are constructed over time, and that we can deconstruct them in some way, and that's what he does. Is it worth reading? Yeah, probably. Is it really shocking? I'm not sure. Is it funny? Yeah, in bits. It is funny. Does it make you think? Yeah, definitely. It does make you think. Because who doesn't want to think, well, if I was like this and I was doing this and I wasn't constrained by this, what would I be like? So it definitely, I suppose, does make you think that. But oddly enough, for me, I kind of, the idea of breaking down that self, I think I'd rather do it in a controlled way rather than the way that he does it. But you know, there you go. Interesting. Hope you enjoy that. The Diceman by Luke Rhinehart, although it's actually his real name is George Cockcroft, and that's the guy. Okay, there you go. Hope you enjoyed that. See you all later. Bye.